Hello again, Martin Braden here. Happy New Year. Can you believe it? It's 2025. Man, oh man, time flies when you're having fun and you're 70-year-olds like I am. I'm so excited to kick off this new year with the new content I'm putting together for Dispelling the Accusatory Fog. It's so awesome that I think my mind's going to pop. Anyway, I can't think of a better way to kick off the new year than to have you meet my very special guest that's waiting in the wings to share his experience. His name's Austin Fife, and he's a brand new author of a book titled Light and Truth Letter. Welcome, Austin, and thanks for accepting my invitation to come on my channel.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's just great to have you here. First of all, let me set the table a little bit before we start our discussion, Austin. Those of you watching this video saw the title of my thumbnail picture where it said, Mormons and Their Critics. Same facts, different interpretations. The truth is, what I do on my channel is not so much apologetics as it is me simply sharing my perspective and interpretations on other people's apologetics and their perspectives. I respect those folks who pay the price to get their doctorate of religious education or in sacred theology or Talmudic law or even basic theology. I love to learn from those who have earned their master's degree in biblical studies, for example, Hebrew studies, and especially those in Mormon studies. I love to talk about religion and the questions that people have regarding its complexities. In fact, my YouTube channel is titled Dispelling the Accusatory Fog, which fog of deception surrounds all of us. If you only listen to these academics with their religious degrees and toss aside the voice of the horse's mouth, so to speak, such as an average member like myself, and especially the voices of prophets and apostles, you run the risk of getting one-sided counsel. And in my opinion, that's not spiritually sound. Jesus himself called such elitist religious academics hypocrites. Here's what he said to the religious elites of his day. It's found in Matthew 23, verses 27 and 28, and I quote, Woe unto you, scribes and ye hypocrites, for ye are like unto whited sepulchres, which indeed appear beautiful outward, but are within full of dead men's bones, end quote. So I liken these religious scribes of Jesus' day to the academic religionists and academic elites of our day. Jesus condemns such critics with their self-righteousness and unbridled pride. Not all of them have that. Those religionists of Jesus' day were ultimately the ones behind Jesus getting crucified. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not condemning, like I said, all college graduates and the resulting pastors who have made the study of religion and philosophy their life's passion. And their academic credentials and accreditations are a reflection of the price they paid. What I am saying here is that a great many of our critics hold up those credentials as a club in order to delegitimize anyone who doesn't have the same status symbol they claim to have. To me, it's just another symptom of pride, because many of them believe such accreditations and degrees are required before your voice has a legitimate say and is worthy of being considered by honest truth seekers. I'm also saying that this kind of higher learning with all of its credentials, though important and a sign of intelligence and real accomplishment, for sure, does not guarantee that what these academics have to say is going to be the whole truth and nothing but the truth. If you are a sincere truth seeker who's in search of the truth and light that Jesus taught, and you're willing to take the time to share your perspective down in the comment section for this video, for example, or any of my videos for that matter, you certainly are welcome to do it and write those down. As you watch and listen to my content, you'll be able to see and hear other voices express their personal perspectives in both my videos and down in the comments section to my videos. That said, I want to frame the discussion that Austin and I are going to have so that you know up front what our objective is with it. First of all, it is to introduce you to Austin and his incredibly helpful book, Light and Truth Letter. It's fantastic. And secondly, it is to help you move your belief cursor along what I'm calling the percentage of probability spectrum regarding truth. At its far left end is the marker that says the Book of Mormon is absolutely false. And at the opposite far end to the right is the marker the Book of Mormon is absolutely true. We will be focusing on sharing evidence, data, sources, and facts that show the probability of it being true versus trying to prove that it's absolutely true using evidence, data, sources, and facts that are available to everyone today. Just know that there aren't any absolutes that prove either side of the debate of their perspectives is absolutely true. There are two main markers to the argument, two sides of the truth. One marker or group being our critics, beliefs and accusations, interpretations, and the other marker or group being the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints claims and beliefs, which, of course, are the truth claims and doctrines of its leaders as they were taught by Christ himself and by Jesus' apostles and prophets. The interesting thing to me is that both sides have the same exact evidence, data, sources, and facts, but the differentiators are found in each side's opinions and interpretations of the exact same evidence, data, sources, and facts. In short, it's the same stack of evidence, but how each side interprets that stack of evidence is what the sincere truth seeker must grapple with. And that leads me to our special guest, Austin Fife, and his book, Truth and Light Letter. Are you still there, Austin? That was a long little intro there.
I'm here. I'm not asleep. Yeah, I'm here.
Well, sorry for taking so long, but I think it was important to set the table for our viewers. Austin, is there anything you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think the way you framed it is a good framing. I received a really angry email from somebody who has left the church in response to my letter. This is a few weeks back. And this individual said that they went to Harvard Divinity School. I don't know if any of this is legitimate, but they went to Harvard Divinity School to prove that the church was true. And they came out of Harvard Divinity School, atheist. That email was really interesting to me because in the Light and Truth Letter or in life, I don't know if you can prove the truth claims of the restoration. I don't think you can prove it false or true. Whether you decide that you're not a believer or you decide that you're a believer, either is a step into the dark, either is a step of faith. And so for me, and some of the reactions I've had from critics have been really interesting to me because they're many of them are operating from this assumption that they need to prove the church is true or false. Whereas the way I see it is there a preponderance of evidence? Am I able to believe, as opposed to the critics maybe asking, must I believe? And so as you framed it, I think that's really accurate, that you're not going to prove it one way or the other. The evidence is convincing to me, sufficient enough to have faith. And I understand for some people, they feel maybe on the opposite side of that. But for those who try to convince you that they can prove the truth claims of the church false, that's just not correct.
Well, that's great. Austin, you're a young man who I find to be authentic in what you say and how you describe yourself. You said you're someone who grew up in the LDS church, and after your mission and getting married in the temple, and after a few years of marriage, you had accumulated a few doubts and questions regarding God and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints beliefs and truth claims, some of which had really apparently caused you some serious concerns and doubts, so much so that you described it as a faith crisis where you no longer believed in God, let alone the church, I think you said. That was about 10 years ago. And so I'm going to let you tell your own story, but I want my viewers to know that in your effort to memorialize your story by writing your book, Light and Truth Letter, you wrote a disclosure, and in it, in my opinion, was your real bio. It gives your readers a great insight into who you are and where you're coming from. Austin, if you're okay with it, and before you lay yourself bare by telling your story, do you mind reading a portion of that disclosure that you have in your book?
Sure. An open letter to the CES Letter Foundation, Mormon Stories, and other critics of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. In January of 2014, this is now 11 years ago, not 10 years ago.
Yes.
But, I lost my faith. I confessed to my wife that I no longer believed in God, much less a Church of Jesus Christ. The conversation hurt, but it was a long time coming. My loss of faith was gradual, and then all at once. It felt like my whole world had turned upside down. It hurt. I felt confused and lost. My wife's reaction surprised me. She did not panic or get defensive. Instead, she told me how excited she was for me. I thought I was leaving the church, but she reframed what I was feeling as the start of a journey. Then she made me a promise. if I could find more light and truth outside of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, she would follow me, and she meant it. It has been 10 years, now 11 years. I started writing this in February of 2024, so it was 10
Okay.
years back then, but
Right.
it's been 10 years, or 11 years. I have read the CES letters several times and dug deep into the sources. I've listened to many interviews on Mormon stories. I spent countless hours hearing and reading from ex-Mormons and other critical Christians. I've learned a lot in my honest and extensive 10-year search. Over time, I felt unsettled about atheism or agnosticism, and I discovered things that forced me to re-examine my unbelief. As a result of my search for more light and truth, some questions troubled me. The following issues are among my main concerns.
Okay. That was, I love that introduction. I want to stop there for a moment, Austin. The last statement you made in your introduction there, where you said, some questions troubled me, is something I want to dig into a little bit deeper as our discussion unfolds here. But before we do that, I want you to give a little more color to your faith journey, because I think there are thousands upon thousands of people out there who have or are still going through the same journey you went through. Your wrestle, in other words, with this thing we call doubts, combined with your decision to search for more truth and light, is the very thing that's at the heart of my channel. I believe there's many of my viewers who are in this very same wilderness and thicket of doubt and are feeling their loss and are struggling to know how to discern what is true and what is not true. Like all of us, they're bombarded with the multiplicity of voices, or what the scriptures call the fiery darts, that are being hurled at us believers. They're the many loud voices you find on social media and on our college campuses today. These are voices that tell them not to believe in God's existence and to accept the voice who says the prophet Joseph Smith was a fraud. Any thoughts on that, Austin?
Yeah. So the Light and Truth letter is actually formatted different than my actual faith journey. If I were to uh, go through my faith journey chronologically, perhaps the second to last chapter, the belief in God, would perhaps come toward the beginning, as opposed to Book of Mormon and other things. My faith struggle really started with just a basic belief in God. Again, it's who cares about Joseph Smith or golden plates or
Yeah,
even a Jesus Christ if you don't even believe in the divine. So that's where
yeah.
my faith crisis started. And I've spent now 11 years really thinking about where did this come from? Because I'm like your typical member of the church. I'm not anyone particularly special. Went to BYU, grew up in the church. I went on a mission. I got married. Like I'm like right down the middle. Your typical member of the church. I serve faithfully in callings, but then here I was struggling with my faith. So I've taken some time to kind of trace back my steps, and I think, and I talk about this uh, a little bit in the Light and Truth letter, where I believe where it came from. And I say here in the introduction, it was gradual and then all at once. I think over time, my worldview had changed. We live in an increasingly secular society. Uh, you know, you don't find faith in very many places these days. All the movies, TV shows, I mean, just everywhere. It's just the waters we swim in. We can't help but be touched by secularism. And so I think it had this gradual, subtle influence on me where I was subtly treating this life as if it were the end. So I was like in my subconscious agnostic or atheist potentially. And it was a gradual thing. But then in December of 2013, I had uh, my wife's father passed away, and he was just incredible, just
Mm,
the best guy. And he was really sick, and he died young, and there were kids still living at home. Like it was terrible.
mm,
He did not deserve to die. And so that was kind of a catalyst where I was sitting in the hospital room as he's actively passing away, holding my 1-year-old son, and the whole family singing hymns. And it's like this really unifying moment. And I was like, I don't believe I'm going to see him again. Uh,
mm.
so my loss of faith was gradual, but then I was kind of pushed up against it was like this fork in the road, where all of a sudden I had to face the truth that I did not believe. And I didn't know when it happened, but I realized it all at once. In that same month, my father figure from when I grew up, he was like my hero, my idol, former bishop, high councilman. He also left the church, and bitterly
Mm,
so,
mm.
and burnt every bridge on his way out. And so it was like, we all have those people where it's like, man, if, Brother Smith, if he knows the church is true, then it must be true, right? We
Mhm.
all have those people, we lean on their testimonies, and he was my guy, right? He was my hero.
Oh
He was my
boy.
idol. I patterned my family after his. Like, I love this man. And then he was gone. And so I lost two father figures in a sense in the same month. And so I think I could kind of get away with kind of sort of not believing subconsciously, but then all of a sudden, from like one moment to the next, I had to face the reality that I no longer believed.
That is fabulous. Do you have your book handy? Maybe not, and that's okay. I'm using an online book
Yep,
of
got it right
yours.
here.
Show it and let them look at what it is. You can get this very simply on Amazon. And I was given the gift by you to be able to have the book online, and that's what I'm using. But thank you for showing that. Austin, you decided to
And
hack your.
it's free to read online. So you
Yes,
don't
it
have to.
is.
People like physical copies is the only reason I did that, but
Yep.
I always intended it to be an online or PDF. That was always the goal.
Well, very good. I so appreciate it. Now, you decided to hack your way through that thicket of doubt that had overgrown in your mind, its seeds having been planted there by the accuser of the brethren, the very father of lies, and his followers, and those are those spirits and their mortal counterparts in the flesh. These enemies of truth, they work day and night to gather the lost and doubting souls amongst us so that they can lead them away from Jesus to their large and spacious building. And I love this little analogy, where they join in their choir of mocking and shaming all believers in Jesus Christ to the very Son of the living God and ruler of the universe. Tell me, how did you keep from ultimately falling prey to their tactics, Austin? How did you stop yourself and save yourself from that end?
Well, I think the way my wife framed what I was going through as a faith journey was
Uh-huh.
incredibly insightful and inspired. And it's one of the I could have just been happy with my miracle and been on my merry way, but I got this really strong prompting about a year ago, that I needed more, that more people needed to hear this story, not because my story is particularly unique or interesting, but I think the framing is really important, where
Mm-hmm.
there are problems in church history. There's weird stuff, and there's weird policies, and our leaders are flawed and they make mistakes. And so I understand why people go through faith struggles.
Mm-hmm.
But the way my wife framed it is, we often talk about a faith crisis, and we should probably stop saying that, because a crisis insinuates an urgent problem, like your house is on fire, you need to run for cover as quickly as you can. That's a crisis. But having concerns and questions is not a crisis. That's just life.
Yes,
Like, we're
yes.
we're all on a journey, we're all learning. And so the way my wife framed what I was feeling, she took the wind out of my crisis sails and turned it more into this exciting journey. Like, I'm going to ask hard questions and I'm going to learn stuff. She was kind of jealous, which is kind of interesting. She's like, you're going to ask the really tough questions and you're going to go on a journey. And I'm excited to see what happens. And so it wouldn't have been enough for me to just say, you know what? I don't believe, I feel like just staying home on Sundays. Like, I couldn't just not believe. I had to replace what I had with something more.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the framing of the Light and Truth letter. Can you find more light and truth outside of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? If you focus on all the problems, oh, you'll find plenty of them. There's lots of
Sure,
problems.
sure.
But can you find something with more light and truth? And that framing of the crisis was really helpful to me. So then all of a sudden, instead of just picking apart all the problems, it was like, okay, so what do I replace it with? What is a better alternative for me and my family that will produce more light and truth? And by framing it that way, it changes the whole ball game.
Do you mind me asking your wife's first name?
Tikla.
Tikla. Well, she sounds like a special, bright lady. You're a very lucky guy, huh?
She's a frequent contributor on Ward Radio Women, so she's usually on there
Ah,
once a week or so. So
awesome. That's awesome. Well,
people,
go ahead.
my whole adult life, I've been Sister Fife's husband, and I'm very proud of that title. So
That's awesome. Well, as I said before, as you gave some color to your story, I thought of your updates to your disclosure or introduction at the beginning of your book and throughout several of the other sections of your book. I particularly liked, Austin, where you wrote, and I quote, "It was necessary that you define what you meant by the critics to whom this letter was addressed." Your book, Light and Truth letter. Continuing, you said, "When I say the critics, I refer to individuals and organizations that manipulate data and history with the intent to harm the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and to persuade current members to resign their membership and former members to stay away, as well as encourage potential future members to avoid membership altogether." You also wrote, "When writing this letter, I prefer to use the term the critics as opposed to the more pejorative term anti-Mormon." You made the point by writing, quote again, "A delusioned former or current Latter-day Saint with sincerely held doubts and concerns does not fit this definition of the critics," end quote. I wanted you to know, Austin, that that is my view as well. You also wrote that it all boils down to interpretations. I 100% agree with that bottom line too. There are two different stacks of evidence, data, sources, and facts. There's just one interpretation, and there's another that's another interpretation of that stack of facts and evidence and sources and so forth. Anyway, before we really get deeper into this, I want to tell you that what I loved about your book most is how you did exactly what our critics have done and are still doing to us, which is to deflect from answering their questions first by asking them questions about their accusations. I love that. You simply turn the table by asking the obvious questions that emerge out of or flow out of their accusations. So, for example, let's go ahead to your first topic here. Let me go right back to share screen. I think it's just wonderful if I can find that. There we
while you're
go.
pulling that up, just a
Yeah.
little bit of color. I published the letter in August 2024, and then I just published an update like a week ago. So that little update that you read was a recent addition because I got some feedback where people felt like um, the critics included them. But if you're a sincere former member of the church, you just have some concerns and some doubts, and that led you out of the church. I get it. That's fine.
Sure.
I understand. That's not who the letter is addressed to. That's not who I'm going after. I do hope former members read it and it invite some critical thinking of some of these things that they've potentially been deceived on. I certainly hope that, but yeah, I just want to give you some color on that addition. That's very recent. It was only in the last week or so I added that.
I really think it's been a timing issue. We were going to get together in October, but things we were out of the country and things. I'm so glad that it's a way to launch this first year of 2025, this new year. Anyhow, at your first topic, the Book of Mormon, let's go ahead and I'm going to share the screen like I've got there. Let me just continue on to illustrate this point beautifully. The way our viewers can see what I'm talking about is to look here in this here, and I'm going to scroll down just a little bit here. See this green little arrow here? I have to say, it's so simple, but no, it is so powerful. And so I'm going to go ahead and just kind of scoop up here just a second. It says, "The Book of Mormon haunted me when I attempted to leave the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. No matter how hard I tried, I could not develop a working naturalistic theory explaining the Book of Mormon that made sense. Any theory asserted by my critics only brought me more questions." And then you wrote the Book of Mormon. No, you said, "Who wrote the Book of Mormon?" It's a stimulating thing. And then down here it says, "If not divine means, how did Joseph Smith come up with the Book of Mormon? If it wasn't from God or Joseph, then where did it come from? Who wrote it?" And you go on to talk and discuss that, discussing yourself with your arrows. And what's lovely is you give an example of the fact that Spalding theory, isn't that the Spalding theory? Do you want to tell about that and why you would then ask the question and kind of shot that down, asking that because you had a reason why you asked it regarding the 116 lost pages? Go ahead, describe
Yeah,
that.
you talked about me kind of inverting the critics' tactics. The critics ask us lots of questions. Uh, the reality and why I wrote the letter is I had far more questions when I was debating leaving the church than I ever did inside. And the critics always ask us questions. So I wanted to take an opportunity to ask a lot of the questions that I asked 11 years ago and that I've asked since, and that still haunt me to this day. So the Spalding manuscript was the most popular theory of how the Book of Mormon came to be. In contemporary, friend and foe to Joseph Smith did not believe he wrote the Book of Mormon. His closest friends and his fiercest enemies, no one who knew him thought that he had the capability to write the Book of Mormon. It's only in recent years that critics come up with this theory that he definitely could have done it. But in his day, no one believed he could. So then the question was, okay, so who wrote it? And the most popular theory at the time was the Spalding manuscript. Solomon Spalding was he had passed away by 1830. He'd passed away like 10 or 15 years before that. Um, but people claim that he wrote this book that Joseph Smith stole, and it was essentially the Book of Mormon. Um, and that was a theory. Up until 1885, when they actually found the manuscript and found it had virtually nothing to do with the Book of Mormon. I mean, we're talking like virtually nothing. It's like a pseudo Roman pirate romance novel. Like it has nothing to do with the Book of Mormon. And so that theory went out of favor. But it was the most popular theory for most of the early church that Joseph Smith had taken this manuscript from Solomon Spalding.
I think the question I loved about that, even though it was 1834 or whatever, when this Spalding theory came up, I love the fact that you asked that question. It would have been nice to be there and say, well, if that's true, then how did the 116 pages get done? And all the
Yeah,
witnesses that saw the document.
Yeah, to clarify the details a little bit, so it
Yeah,
was Martin Harris who lost the
Martin Harris.
116
That's right.
pages, but Sidney Rigdon, the reason he's involved at all is he was connected to Solomon Spalding. I'm trying to remember the name of the pastor. I should remember it. I'm spacing right now, but there was a connection to Solomon Spalding, and so that's where the theory comes from, is people trying to reverse engineer how did Joseph Smith do this. I'm like, okay, well, Sidney Rigdon has this loose connection to Solomon Spalding, so he must have given him this manuscript, and that must have been how it was. The problem is Sidney Rigdon met Joseph Smith and read the Book of Mormon after it was published. And so how is Sidney Rigdon, and this is a question in the letter, how is Sidney Rigdon converted by the book that he helped Joseph Smith write, 2 years before he ever met Joseph Smith, right? So that's just, you take the critics and follow their arguments to their logical conclusion, and you see where those holes are, and that's a big one.
And that's exactly what about this is a great approach, because I believe most every single one of these things we're going to lightly go through here in your book here, that is the approach that you're taking with these green arrowed questions. Because if this is true, then what about that? If what you're saying is true, then this implies this. But what about that? It doesn't match up. There's always the holes that you're talking about. Most generally, there's those holes. And so every single one with holes on it, the same thing with their anachronisms, 204 anachronism, but 75+% were believed years ago, but over that years of nearly 204 years, the majority have gone. Well, what about that? What trend is that showing? Those are the kind of questions that I'm getting as I read your book, and I see where Austin Fife's brain is working. And has it been a hard thing to do, or do those questions automatically pop into your head, Austin?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if it's harder for me or easier for me. I'm not sure, but like right where your screen is right now, if Joseph Smith made the Book of Mormon, he just off the top of his head, he made it up. I mean, the likelihood of that is it's pretty far-fetched as is, but even let's say he did it, the Book of Mormon would permeate every aspect of his life. He couldn't help but the Book of Mormon would just pop out in everyday conversation constantly. Yet, in his 173 public Nauvoo discourses, Joseph Smith only quotes a couple Book of Mormon scriptures, whereas he quotes dozens and dozens and dozens of biblical scriptures. So he clearly has a lack of familiarity with the Book of Mormon. So then my question is, if he's the author, if he wrote it, he's brilliant and he made it up, why is he so unfamiliar with it compared to the Bible? Right? That's kind of some of the questions that haunted me back then. It's like, how do we explain this naturalistically?
Well, as you did that, Austin, and I don't know if you mentioned the CES letter, you mentioned Mormon stories, you mentioned these other places. That's probably where you gathered some of the criticisms against the truth claims and the accusations. Did you take those and really massage it that way? How did you approach it to get the answers that you then felt confident? Say, I've got to write this down. I've got to go into and writing this letter because this is this and this and this is what's been coming to me, and I've got most of those resolved. I just want to get into your head a little bit of how you got there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't list a lot of answers in the Light and Truth letter. Certainly, sometimes I insinuate certain answers, but I
Mhm.
never try to say, and therefore. That's not really the goal of the letter. I would hope somebody who's struggling in their faith or somebody who's left the church will read through the letter and it'll spark a discussion. It'll spark some questions and lead them down a path to find more light and truth. So I really try not to say, and therefore, and give some sort of like final conclusion. So I've got my answers to these questions. I have plenty of questions I still don't have the answer to, and it's part of
Mhm.
my journey. It's part of my faith. But yeah, I really try not to like. So here's the answer. Period. I just ask questions.
Well, we're going to jump in to give an example. Other prolific authors, I'm reading this, have written fictional stories and characters. Maybe there was a whole lot of memorable writers during that last 200 plus years from
Right.
Joseph's time. Whereas the Book of Mormon purports to be a historical, not fiction book. If Joseph Smith is making up the Book of Mormon, like the critics have said, why are so many of its claims proving more true as time goes on? If the Book of Mormon comes from the imagination of a 23-year-old farm boy, how have millions of members been touched by it and joined the church? Some authors, I love this part, some authors have written short books quickly. How many uneducated and inexperienced authors have written something close to 270,000 words in one draft in less than 3 months? Is there any example of a feat remotely close to what critics say Joseph Smith did? See, that's the kind of question that I believe an honest truth seeker should ask themselves. They should go through this little bit of mental gymnastics and say, okay, here's the claim, here's the criticism or accusation. What am I hearing? And I think if you pause and be prayerful about it and have a pad ready, I think the Spirit's going to make these questions come popping into your head, because that's what's happened to me as I've gone through. I've done a little searches and I've reflected on my scripture reading, but then I have a prayer about something that maybe I'm struggling with, and all sorts of things that I didn't even know about come to my head that I had to go search out and come up with the questions that you're asking here is the very thing that I asked myself. There's no way under God's green earth that I mean, think of 23-year-olds that you've associated with and are associating with right now. They're fine young men, but they've got a lot to learn, a lot more until they get 80 years old, what they learned in that time. Very few can have accomplished what this young man did. How did he do this? Critics write off the one draft argument by pointing out the approximately 4,000 authorized changes made in the 1887 and 1840 editions of the 37 and 1840 editions of the Book of Mormon compared to the 1830 edition. Weren't the vast majority of the changes typographical in nature? That's a question you should ask. When they make a claim, those be the jury, be the attorney that questions the statements. The people are on the stand, and what they're telling you that is true about the church to tear it down. Be that attorney and ask, okay, you're saying this. Well, what about this? And what about this? I think it'll start to break down. The changes were for the purpose of aligning the printer's manuscript with the original translation. Then you go on to a whole list of, there's the Spalding manuscript, a whole list of the many different things that were contained in the Book of Mormon. And you say, how did Joseph Smith do this? and do that? How do you know about this? How do you know about that? Do people really take that much time, Austin, to ask themselves those questions, or do they just get flooded with doubt? What's your experience?
I guess it depends. I have definitely seen, and I fall prey to this as well. I mean, we're kind of programmed to want short, quick, and easy answers. It's just something that, especially with the advent of like social media and TikTok, it's becoming even worse. But a short, quick, easy answer is the most persuasive to us, even if the truth is a lot more complex and nuanced. And so I have unfortunately seen some people who will have some really challenging gospel question that rocks their faith. I mean, it rocks their world, but then they kind of have no interest in finding the answer. It's a very strange phenomenon. I'm still trying to kind of wrap my head around that, but there's some people who've been just crushed. Uh, their faith has been crushed and their whole world has fallen apart. But then they stop. They asked one question and then they stop. They don't keep going. And so yeah, I hope this sort of thing helps people.
Well, I certainly hope it does too. I think it will. Like I said, I believe there's a lot of folks out there that, if they were truly willing to stop and think about it, our critics usually ask very short, simple questions, but a whole barrage of them, like little, like I said, like a whole flood of arrows just flowing over and hitting them all at once, 70, 80, 90 type questions. But if they stop and think about it, most of those darts that are thrown are complex answers. It doesn't just happen in a quick one sentence answer because there is nuance and there's things that make it complex that it takes hours sometimes to really lay that out and say, now here's why that question doesn't work. And what did you find your most difficult hurdle, question, accusation of the critics to get over? What was your, as you think back on it, one that really kind of made
Yeah,
you hit your
I,
knees a little bit?
I guess circling back to kind of my journey, I mentioned that belief in God is where my journey started. Who cares about Joseph Smith or anything else? And
Sure.
so, though I was learning, sometimes when you reconstruct a story, you have to reconstruct it chronologically, but a lot of this sometimes is happening all at once, right? I'm learning about
Sure.
early church history while reestablishing my relationship with God. But
Mm.
that was the most important question to me, was the problem of evil. How can a loving God let terrible, awful, nasty, terrible things happen to us since the beginning of time if he's loving and all powerful, right? And so that was my main, most troubling question. And I outline in the second to last chapter, belief in God, how I came back not to belief in God necessarily, but to a place where I could see where belief in God was rational. Like I saw that there was space for me to believe. So once I hit that point, then I went down the rabbit hole of early church history and all these different things. So to come back to your question, what was the most troubling thing to me? And I think I even say this in the Light and Truth letter. I think it was anachronisms. That was the one that was kind of the stickler for me. That was a barrier for me, coming back into the fold potentially.
After you establish for yourself the probability that God lives, and then you then moved on with the setup that your wife set you up to do, and that is to find more light and truth somewhere else. Uh, how'd you go about that? Once you got that feeling that there is definitely a God, and somehow you overcame that uh, question of all questions about evil of all sorts, uh, how can he be the loving God now letting this all happen? After you hurdled that one, um, what led you in, and did you go in all different directions, or you just felt overwhelmed? How did you break it down? Because other
Yeah,
folks are probably overwhelmed and just don't know where to
yeah.
start.
So I heard a phrase, and this is in the Light and Truth letter. I heard a phrase in an unrelated setting, but it rattled me to my core, like James 1:5 for Joseph Smith. It was one of those things that just shook me in a completely unrelated setting. Uh, Somebody said, "Death is not the worst thing that can happen to us." And that one liner was a catalyst for inspiration and revelation. And I just thought about that constantly. I turned that over and over and over and over in my head because I was treating this life as the end of all existence. And if it is the end of all existence, then any suffering and wrong truly is unjust. But if this is just a blip in the eternal timetable, this is just a moment. And let's say hypothetically, we consented to it. We said, yeah, I raised my hand. I consent to experience that mortality. And I know there's no guarantees. I may suffer. I may, from the moment I'm born, I may suffer for years, and it may be unjust, but I consent to it because God will make it right. Well, how can God make it right? Well, maybe there needs to be some like price paid, like some redeemer or savior of sorts. And so, what I was doing, if you noticed, is in the depths of my faith crisis, I was reconstructing the story of the restoration
Mhm.
and the
There you go.
story that Joseph Smith taught in the restored gospel of Jesus Christ. So it was like missionary Austin was teaching investigator Austin. It was really weird.
That's
Um,
awesome. That's a good
but
analogy. That's wonderful.
But what happened is I realized that the restoration provided a reasonable explanation to the problem of evil in existence. And so again, it wasn't that I believed all of a sudden. It was just like, okay, I could believe in that. That actually makes a lot of sense. And so then once I kind of checked that box, again, it's not that I did believe, it was more like, okay, I see that. Now I got to explore the truth claims with fresh eyes. And what happens when I was growing up in the church, I didn't know anything, right?
Mhm.
I didn't know anything. When I'm getting ready for my mission, I want to know what are these dastardly critics saying so I can fight back. So I had like my cap on, my apologetics cap, because I'm going to fight the critics. And then when I went through my faith crisis, all of a sudden, and what happens when I was on the apologetic side, it was like what the apologists said was truth, right? They are sharing, they're the end all be all. But then when I had my faith crisis, like the critics, they are the ones telling the truth. They're the end all be all. But when my wife framed it as find more light and truth, and this is a faith journey, I all of a sudden got rid of the narratives. It was just like, okay, so what happened in early church history? What happened with this controversial thing with the Book of Mormon, with you name it? Like what happened? And seeing it with fresh eyes. And I wasn't trying to preserve a narrative one way or another. I just wanted to know what happened. What is true? How did this work? And as I was going down this rabbit hole, I discovered something. I discovered that I wasn't going to prove the church was true
Hello.
or false.
Yeah.
I realized that at some point I had to make a decision to believe something because either was a step into the dark. And so I made a decision months after my initial faith crisis that I would be a believing member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I don't know if it's true, but I believe it is. That was the decision that I made. And it was, Martin, it was awesome. Like I can't, it was so exciting because I didn't have to pretend. I didn't have to stand up at the pulpit, pound my fist and say, I know without a shadow of a doubt. I could just say, I don't know very much, but I believe that there is a savior. I believe there's a God in heaven. And there was something so liberating and freeing about that. So the gospel became new and exciting to me because I was no longer a member who knew stuff. I was just a devout, believing guy who just believed. And there was something really fun and exciting and thrilling about that. And so that was the turning point where I went down this rabbit hole and I had all these questions, but I realized, man, I'm never going to prove this true or false. So I think I just have to make a decision about what I want to believe. And if there is a God, if I say, okay, I believe, then maybe he'll do something with me. And that's and then the rest is history. And I have a faith scale, right? Of my doubts and my faith. And my scale shifted over the years. I'm not in the same place I was, 11, 10 years ago, but I never regretted becoming a believing member. That was the best decision I could have made. It was awesome.
I don't want to shut this off. I'm going to keep it close to the hour, but one of the things I want you to do, Austin, is to answer this question. You remind me of the scripture of the man that says, I believe, help thou my unbelief. In other words, there's things I believe that help the unbelief side of me to get
Right.
through this situation. That's what that's always meant. That's what I see it is kind of like that story. I believe, but help me with my unbelief. But what I'd like you to talk about to close this off is your brush with the Holy Ghost, affirming, ratifying this belief and the work that you did. Did you have any of that kind of experience over this last 10 years, especially last year or two? What's that been like? Because we talk about um, the only way we really learn and it can come to know in our knower truth is through the power and gift of the Holy Ghost and its influence and impressions. Tell me a little bit about that as we close this off.
Yeah, I'll share three things
It's personal, I know.
in rapid succession. In the Light and Truth letter, I talk about an experience a few months after my faith crisis where I decided I'm going to be a believer. And I was going through something really difficult, really challenging. I was very anxious. I was sitting in my car, drinking a Dr. Pepper, eating chips, eating beef jerky, playing a game on my phone, and listening to music. I was doing all these things that I knew how to do to comfort me because I was really anxious. And I kind of this moment of realization, I kind of looked at myself and laughed. I was just like, what am I doing? So I put it all away. I turned off the music, put away my phone, and I gathered myself and I said a prayer. And my prayer was really simple. And again, this is, I don't know anything. I just believe. And I just said, God, please comfort me.
Mm,
And that was it. And from one moment to the next, and this is not a unique experience. This isn't like this is the one and only time. This happens lots of times. But in that moment, in that kind of low in my faith, I reached out to God and I received the comfort and reassurance and enthusiasm that I needed to do this really hard thing that I didn't want to do, that I had to do. Um, so that was a faith promoting experience. I had a very sacred experience in 2017. I allude to it a little bit in the Light and Truth letter. I won't discuss it here,
that's
but
fine.
I had a very, uh, I've had lots of whispers, I've had lots of promptings, lots of inspiration. This was different than that. And
Okay.
then just a year ago, I was thinking about, I was just lamenting, here 11, 12 years after the CES letter has been published, it's still the most popular anti-Mormon document that's out there, and it still rocks people's faith to this day.
Yep.
And I know that thing backwards and forwards. I know the trick. I know exactly what it's doing. And it's like me going, oh, why is this still working? And I just had this moment where I thought maybe I can't be content with my own miracle. Maybe I need to share my experience and provide a resource that may help people who are similar to me, who, maybe wanted to believe but needed some rational reasons to because they were painted into a faith corner that they can't get out of.
Yeah.
So then I, got on my knees and prayed and received a very strong impression that this was the right thing to do. One last experience. I was really struggling with the polygamy section. Polygamy is now an even more controversial topic than it.
Yes, it is.
Um, so I really wanted to be sensitive. I wanted to tell the truth. It's a bit of a landmine issue, and so I had a small section on polygamy, but then I literally was about to publish. Like I was done with the letter. This is back in August. But my brother-in-law and his wife called me and said, we feel like you need to add more to this section. I'm like, I felt like I kind of said everything that I wanted to say. And so I kind of turned them down. But then I thought that night, I'm like, I think they're right. So now I was so done with the letter by that time.
Yeah, I
Like, this
bet you
is
were.
the 11th hour. So I brought my laptop to work. And on my lunch break, I had the most revelatory hour of writing that I had the entire few months that I wrote the Light and Truth letter. And it was, I think, maybe the only time I wrote a very large section in a very short period. And I pulled a Joseph Smith. It was like a one draft. I sent
Well,
it to my wife, and she got choked up and was like, this is perfect what you did. So yeah, that just a handful of experience. I've had lots of experiences that have helped my faith and supported my faith, but those are just some of them.
And that experience you had with that 1 hour, right? Is it in the book now? That's what it is. It's in there included as
Yeah.
one of those updates type thing.
Yeah.
Well,
Now now the polygamy is its own section. It was a mini section under other, but now it's its own unique section. Yeah. Plural marriage is what the section's called.
oh, that's great. Well, Austin, this has been a delight for me. I am glad we didn't want to go a lot into your book. I hope I've whetted the appetite for folks to want to get and hear your story and hear and read all that and ask those questions and see how you've answered questions. I think we've done a good job at stirring that up a little bit. I hope you'll get some folks, because I believe that some of the things that you wrestled with in that thicket of doubt, hacking away each of those thorny limbs that hooked you, I think you'll help them to be freeing themselves from that same doubt and thicket. I just want to, those of you who've watched this video with me and Austin, I hope that some of your questions have been answered. I hope you've been inspired to maybe follow suit and follow some of the pattern that Austin did, because I think you'll have the answers and you'll have that spirit whacking your tuner in your knower that this is real, this is true. I can get that same thing because God loves you the same way he loves Austin and he loves me. So everyone, I appreciate you coming and joining us in this video tonight. Austin, thank you. And I hope you have a wonderful 2025. Until next time, I want to wish all of you continued success. Goodbye.